17 years old, a kid from Ohio knocked the Beatles off #1, then spent the rest of his life making other people famous while his own name quietly disappeared. He spliced magnetic tape by hand to engineer one of the decade's biggest instrumental hits, wrote the anthem that made Hulk Hogan immortal and 3 presidents famous, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame never once called. Too good at everything to be remembered for anything. This is the rise and fall of Rick Derringer. Fort Recovery, Ohio, 1956, a small Midwestern town where Rick Derringer's father worked as a railroad section foreman, where precision mattered and every component had to fit exactly right, where the whole system failed, and where a 9-year-old boy received his first electric guitar and treated it not as a toy but as a sacred tool, practicing the same G and D chords thousands of times in a single night until the mechanical movement became pure instinct, building through sheer blue-collar repetition a foundation that would eventually carry him to the top of the American charts before he was old enough to vote. By 15, he and his brother had formed the McCoys, operating with the discipline of factory workers on the Midwest club circuit, and in the summer of 1965, their moment arrived, when New York producers heard something explosive in a minor R&B track called My Girl Sloopy, a song Rick persuaded them to rename Hang On Sloopy. And by October of that year, it had reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, knocking the Beatles yesterday from the top spot and turning a garage band from Indiana into a national phenomenon overnight. But success came with a hidden cost, because the bubblegum label that attached itself to their catchy sing-along sound poisoned their credibility with the serious rock audience they wanted, leaving Rick to quietly reinvent himself as the invisible architect behind other people's greatness, first stabilizing and producing Johnny Winter's wild blues genius into something radio could actually play, then engineering Frankenstein for Edgar Winter's group by physically cutting and splicing magnetic tape for hours until a sprawling experimental jam became a Grammy-nominated #1 instrumental, demonstrating a technical ingenuity that placed him in a category almost no one else occupied. His 1973 debut solo album produced rock and roll hoochie coo and genuine critical respect, but superstar commercial success never materialized because Rick was simply too versatile to be pinned to a single identity in an industry that demanded artists fit neatly into boxes, leaving him perpetually valued by everyone who worked with him and perpetually overlooked by the machine that decided who became a legend.
Man, Rick Derringer's story really shows how brutal the music industry can be when you're too good at too many things. He knocks the Beatles off #1 at 17, engineers Frankenstein, produces Weird Al, writes Hulk Hogan's anthem, and still ends up as the guy nobody remembers by name. Versatility is a gift, but in rock, it's often a curse. The industry wants one clear brand, not a Swiss Army knife genius. What do you think? Does being the guy behind the hits get the respect it deserves? Drop your thoughts in the comments.
Then came the 1980s, producing Weird Al Yankovic's Grammy-winning parodies and writing Real American, the anthem that defined Hulk Hogan's entire era and was later used by Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Donald Trump, a song so deeply embedded in American culture that it became impossible to ignore, yet somehow never attached his name to the public consciousness the way it deserved, leaving him as the ghost behind some of the most recognizable moments in American popular culture, right up until his passing in May 2025 at the age of 77. He knocked the Beatles off #1 and wrote the soundtrack to an entire era, and most people still can't name him. Subscribe to Voice of Legends because the greatest craftsmen rarely get the monuments they deserve.